Hello and welcome to Dazatron's Diorama Llama, and in this episode I'm going to be repairing a Mego Magna-hero Batman. So I was really fortunate to be able to pick up this fella from a little vintage toy shop in Kings Winford, which is near me in the UK in the West Midlands. And as you can see, he's looking a little bit worse for wear, but actually all of the the magnetic parts are really clean, often they go rusty. He has lost his thumb, which is the main repair that I'll be doing today. You can see his bat logo there has also kind of rubbed off over time, but he still has his cape, which is amazing, as that's one of the first things that go missing on these figures. So I just want to give a shout out to Gavin from Lost in Toys, who owns this shop in Kings Winford. Just a great collection of toys for sale there. So if you're in the UK and you're anywhere close to the West Midlands, I would definitely recommend you go and check him out. So I've given this guy a quick clean, just using some antibacterial kind of hand soap and a toothbrush, and he's scrubbed up really well. You don't need to worry too much about kind of removing any paint when you're using a toothbrush, because it's not going to cause any damage really. And yeah, really pleased already with the difference that this has made, removing what seemed to be years of grime. I do know this came from the seller's childhood collection, and actually these figures were only released in Italy, so I'm amazed that he had this as a child really. So it'd be interesting to know what the story was behind this character. So to repair the thumb, I'm going to be using Milliput, which is an epoxy putty. So you get kind of two types of putty, like a kind of a plasticine that you can then mix together, and it hardens over time. It usually takes a few hours to harden, and you've probably got a good, I would say, 30 minutes kind of sculpting time, and maybe a bit more than that. So it's quite a good material to use actually for sculpting, and I have used this in the past before. So do have a look at some of my repairing videos and my customizing videos, because it's a really good tool for that. Do make sure when you are removing the different kind of putties, you want to make sure you haven't got any of the other putty on your hands, because obviously it kind of creates this kind of chemical reaction. So do make sure you're using a different finger or different tool when you're kind of taking this out. Now you can wear gloves for this, but to be fair, it washes off really easily. As long as you don't let it dry on your fingers, then it's absolutely fine. So I need a really tiny amount for this, because I'm only repairing the thumb. And that's one of the reasons why I'm using this material, because it hardens really well. It goes really solid, and it has a really good it adheres itself really well to whatever you're sticking it to. So, and it will stick to pretty much anything. So you just need to really kind of blend those two parts together. This is a terracotta version of Milliput, hence why it's got that kind of reddish orange kind of look to it, or colour to it. And you can get it in white and I think grey variations as well. So once I've mixed it together, and it's really important you thoroughly mixed it so it's one colour, there's no kind of marbling effect in there. It's really then a case of just trying to mould it and fit it to where you want it to go. Though at this stage, because it's very soft, because we've just mixed it together, it's going to take a little bit of time for it to start to kind of stick to where you want it to go. So I've kind of put it in place, and I've just left it for probably 5 or so minutes. And then I'm using one of these rubber tools. So it's got kind of a flexible end to it. Looks a little bit like a paintbrush, but it's actually kind of like a tapered rubbered sculpting tool. Often used for things like kind of polymer clay and stuff like that. And you can get them in various sizes, but they're really good tools for kind of sculpting, particularly if you want to get into kind of smaller or finer areas. So you can see that already I'm reasonably happy with the shape of that thumb. It just needs to be thinned down a little bit, Comparing it to the other hand, it's looking a little bit wide. We don't want him to have a chunky thumb. So I'm just going to kind of smooth that down a little bit. If you are using a knife for this, it is really important you clean the knife afterwards, because again, this stuff will stick to the knife and you won't be able to use it again. So I'm just removing some of the excess that we don't need. And then I can go back to using that sculpting tool. And I've just used a little bit of water. The nice thing again about milliput is that you can use water to smooth it out, and it gives it a nicer finish. And I'm just trying to blend that into the kind of the palm of the hand. Yeah, there's also a little scuff on the back of this hand. So for while I've got that milliput mixed up, just gonna add a tiny amount in there just to kind of fill that gap. And again, just smooth that in. And then use a little bit of water just to make sure there's no kind of texture and it looks kind of flush to the rest of the hand. So I'm pretty happy with that. So if we just do a comparison there, they're looking, yeah, pretty similar. So I'm pretty happy. So now it's time to leave that to dry. So it's really important that you give that a good, I would say 5 hours at least. It doesn't need 24 hours to harden fully. But I would certainly give it a few hours. So once that has hardened, it then comes to trying to mix some paint to get a right colour match, which is the bit that's going to be a bit difficult. There's a bit unsure whether to use enamel paints or acrylic paints on this. I do like the finish that you get with enamel paints, and enamels are quite good at kind of hiding any blemishes as well in the sculpting process. So milliput does take enamels really easily, but I think for this one I'm going to use acrylics just in case I make a mistake, because I can remove the acrylic quite easily, whereas removing enamels is much more difficult. So just before we go to the painting process, I'm just using a little bit of wet and dry paper. So this is the really fine gritted kind of sandpaper, just again to get rid of any blemishes that I've noticed as the milliput has hardened. And then just a small file just to get into some of those areas. Now, although this should have quite a strong texture, still be careful that you don't kind of press too hard, as you don't want to snap off the milliput that you've added. So that's now smoothed down. I've got a little bit of card there to mix on. So I'm going to use a mixture of the kind of Daler Rowney kind of artist acrylic paints, and also the Vallejo model paints, which is more kind of like Warhammer paints. So I'm just going to put a small amount. So that's the primary blue. And because I'm not too sure which colours I need to use, I'm just going to try a few out. That's ultramarine. And just put a really tiny amount out. So that's the kind of artist paints. And then we've got the model colours. So this is a much kind of thinner consistency. I think this is a pastel blue. And then I've got a darker blue here, which I think is a Prussian blue. Yeah. And because I need to lighten this down, I'm just going to add a little bit of white as well. I might not need the white, as I've got that kind of that much lighter colour, almost like a sky blue colour. But just in case. So I'm going to take quite a fine brush. And it's really a case of test it and see with this. I don't know beforehand, hence why I'm just going to have a little kind of play and mix in these colours. You will need some water, as acrylics do dry as a plastic. So I'm actually using the mixture of the model paint colours and the artist acrylics there. So that was the primary blue and that lighter blue, which name has gone out of my head now. So I'm going to just try out some of the other combinations and see how they look. You can see that's not looking as close as actually the original combination there. So let's try the final blue, which is the Prussian blue. And again, not too bad, a little bit better, but I think actually the first blue, the primary blue, works the best. So I'm just going to clean the brush and just make sure there's none of the other colours on there. And just mix that up again. And that's actually pretty close. So I'm just going to test that on part of the area where I've placed the milliput. So let's come up a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to take a little bit more of that primary blue. Yeah, and that's matching much better now. So there's also a few little kind of dents and scuffs. So I'm just going to fill those in while I've got the paint mixed up. And that's matching really well, actually, much better than what I thought it would. But again, the nice thing about the acrylic is I can easily paint over that or change it if it didn't work as I wanted it to. I wouldn't add any water to the mixture, as I think it will be kind of too watered down. And actually using the model paints, which is a thinner consistency anyway, I think that's kind of helped the paint go on much better. So I'm really happy with that. So I'm just going to do a quick check just to see if there's any other little areas that need touching up. You can see there that's worked really well. So this is the other arm now. So although there's no damage as such, there's just a few little scuffs on the end of the thumb and the fingers. So I'm just going to use that paint mixture just to neaten those up a little bit. Now, I'm not too fussed about getting rid of every scratch or blemish. You know, at the end of the day, these are toys. I like it when toys look like they've been played with. So I don't want to get rid of everything. But if I've got the materials there and there's something that's kind of sticking out, so the end of Batman's nose was looking, again, not quite as good as it could, so just a little bit of touching up there. I think there's just a few little scratches on the side and the back of his head. But only do this if you've got a good colour match, because if you haven't, when you're painting in those blemishes, you're going to make it look worse. Yeah, so I'm happy with that. So because I want to use my phone as a reference, I'm just using the settings option and taking off the screensaver. So I can just keep this at hand while I'm painting. So this is off the Mego Museum website. So they've got a picture here of the original toy. I think it's a sketch of it as well, so I can get a good idea what that logo is meant to look like. And I'm going to use just the regular black Vallejo paints. Again, just a tiny amount. And it is better to use the model paints for these kind of finer details, because they flow better. When you're using the thicker kind of fine art paints, you need to water them down a little bit first. So I'm using a tiny brush here. So again, these are kind of miniature brushes, miniature paint brushes. So I'm just trying to paint in that line, which is quite hard. You need to have a really steady hand, which I don't have. The nice thing is there was a few little kind of marks from the previous logo, so I could get a good idea where I need to place the Batman logo. And I'm pretty happy with that. The outline around the edge, the oval, that could be a little bit neater, but I'm pretty happy. So let's fix him back together. Let's put him all back together and see how he looks now. Now he's been cleaned and he's had a bit of a paint job. And he's got his thumb repaired as well. And I'm really pleased, because this was a toy from the 70s. I think it was 1979. So it's been around for quite a while. And as I said, really unusual to find it with the cape. So I was over the moon when I saw this yesterday in the wild, in a shop near me. Couldn't believe it. I've seen these online before and I never thought I'd be able to get one. So if you do like repairing toys, definitely check out Toy Polloi. He's a much better toy repairer than I am. And if you want to find out a bit more about these Magna-heroes, Brickman Tooth from the Mego Museum did a video on this really recently. I think it was just after Christmas. So definitely check that out for a bit more information on these toys. So thank you for watching. Hopefully that will inspire you to have a go at fixing your own toys. If you've got a small repair job, that can be done. But Milliput's a great tool to use. And I think he looks great on display and a worthy addition to my kind of magnetic heroes line. So see you next time, guys.